Hello, everyone. This is Marcin from MMA Interesting Prospects podcast. This is a first episode of WEC Talk, and this project is about a conversation with WEC fighters. And of course, the main topic of this conversation will be a legendary promotion, WEC. So our first guest is Jamie Varner, former WEC lightweight champion, and of course also a UFC veteran. Hello, Jamie. How are you?
I'm well, man. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks, Jamie. First of all, many thanks for taking the invitation. You are the first fighter that I contacted because I was a fan of you for many years. So it's like honor for me to have you as the first guest. And you made your pro debut in 2003. And I know that, of course, that you have a boxing background and wrestling background, but what was overall the reason to become a MMA fighter and to start this sports like wrestling and boxing?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of a long story, so I'll try to give you a condensed version. I saw it on TV. The very first UFC, I saw on TV, and I saw like a little guy essentially beating up big guys, and I was always kind of like a littler guy. I think I mean in wrestling I always kind of wrestled like in the lower weight classes to like the lower middle weight classes as I got older. And so I think a lot of it had to do with just like that. I had like a fear of being bullied. I got beat up one time in eighth grade, and I was just like never again. I never wanted to get beat up again. And so in ninth grade I joined the wrestling team, and from then on, it was kind of like just history. The sport was growing. The sport was pretty popular where I'm from in the United States. I'm from Arizona, and there was a local promotion called Rage in the Cage, and I saw a lot of like former high school wrestlers and college wrestlers fighting there and winning. And so I'm like, oh, well, it's like a wrestling match where you get to punch people. So I made a decision that I wanted to do it in 10th grade. There was a guy from my high school who was supposedly like the toughest guy in high school. Everybody was scared of him, and he was supposed to fight in Rage in the Cage, and he never did. He backed out because he was scared. And like I just alluded to earlier, I'm like, I mean, it's like a wrestling match where you get to punch people, and there's so many wrestling matches where I wanted to punch my opponent. So for me, it was like kind of like a natural transition. I found my first like MMA gym and coach right before my senior year, so 12th grade. Right before that, I started training for it, and then once my senior year, 12th grade, like wrestling season, or once wrestling season started, I stopped doing MMA training. I just focused on wrestling. Then right after wrestling season of my senior year of high school, I fought like I think I fought like a month later. So wrestling ended in February, and my very first fight while I was still in high school was in March, and I won. I had some success. It was a great experience, and I had like 500 kids from my school showed up, and people didn't know if I was going to win or lose. I think they came to just see a fight and possibly see me get my butt kicked, but I ended up winning. And then I fought again like a month or two later, and I ended up losing a decision. And after that loss, it just really motivated me. I'm like, I want to do this. But there were guys like Jens Pulver, who hopefully you can talk to him. He's a UFC and WEC legend. Um, he was like one of my main motivations. Like when I saw him beat BJ Penn, and he was a wrestler and a boxer, I was like, I want to be like that guy. And then I also remember Dwayne Ludwig. He was this amazing kickboxer, and I watched his kickboxing fights, and I'm like, I want to have striking like that guy. And Matt Hughes came along, and he was a really good wrestler, and I'm like, okay, I want to be like Jens Pulver, Matt Hughes, and Dwayne Ludwig. I want to have the striking of Dwayne Ludwig. I wanted to have the wrestling like Matt Hughes, but I wanted to put it together and be explosive like Jens Pulver. So I had these guys that I just idolized, and they kind of like paved the way for me.
So if you want to like wrestle another guy with punching him, MMA was like a perfect sport for you. And you like from beginning of your career you had great results because you have many submission wins, and of course you definitely won like much more the fights that you lost, and you fought against like of course in 2003-4 it was a little bit of also a different sport, so it was another times, but your results was as good as anyone, and in the end you were assigned to UFC.
Yeah. I mean, like I was kind of like the first wave of fighters that could do a little bit of everything. So obviously I had a little bit of a boxing background, and then that just got better as I got older and found better gyms to train at. But I had good striking, I had good wrestling, and then I had good jujitsu. I won worlds as a blue belt. I won worlds as a purple belt in jujitsu. So I was like one of the first wave of guys that could do a little bit of everything. Because when I first started training, you were either a grappler or you were a striker. Like that, you were like kind of one or the other. And for me, what made me unique and why I feel like I got so many wins because I could, you know, if I fought a striker, I would take him down and submit him. If I was fighting a grappler, I would keep the fight on the feet and knock him out or beat him up until he made a mistake and I could get the submission or get the TKO or what have you. So yeah, I think it was like I was just kind of a part of that first wave of guys that could do a little bit of everything. But you're right, like when I first started, it was like you're kind of like one or the other. But as you've seen the sport evolve, I mean, now guys they're like black belts in jujitsu. They're professional kickboxers. They're great boxers, but then they're also, high level wrestlers. So like, I mean, the sport just keeps getting better and better and better.
And when you got to the UFC, your first opponent was Hermes Franca, and actually it was a great fight from you because in the second and in the first round and in the second round you looked great, and in the third he caught you in the armbar. So what did you thought about this bout, and how you felt after this fight?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something to be said about like having your first fight in the UFC and like the nerves. I was 21 years old, and at the time I was the youngest guy in the UFC, and I mean it was crazy. It was so surreal. I couldn't believe I was there. I was on autopilot, but I learned some valuable lessons. I think my immaturity really showed in that fight. Like I shot a bunch of takedowns and I gassed myself out. I had good conditioning going into the fight, but my cardio, I think the intensity and the pace that I set wasn't really realistic. And when I got to that third round, that's when I started making mistakes, and that's when I got caught in the armbar. But that was a fight I was winning. And again, I was my very first fight in the UFC. I was 21 years old, and I think he was ranked like fourth or fifth in the world at the time. So he beat me, then he beat Spencer Fisher right after he fought me, knocked Spencer Fisher out, and then he fought for a world title against Sean Shirt. I mean, I fought a guy that was literally just, two fights away from a world title. So, I mean, it showed me like the things I needed to work on. It showed me that I also belonged there. And then my next fight, I think, was like 5 or 6 months later, and it lasted like 2 minutes. So, it was a great learning experience for me. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't change anything about my career. I think things happen things happen for you, not to you. And that was one of those experiences that happened for me that allowed me to grow and mature as a fighter.
And if you would win against Hermes Franca, maybe even in your next fight you will face a fighter for the title. What would be crazy, because you were in that time very young fighter, as you said. You were just 21, so it would be a crazy if you get it. But after this fight, you get another UFC fight, and it was like super easy for you. You fought against undefeated fighter. I believe he was 11-0, and it lasted like 60 seconds, something around it, and you finished him with rear naked choke. So I think that this performance showed really how good you are.
Yeah, I think it just added a new element. I wasn't as scared when I walked out there. There's something about being under those UFC lights and having Bruce Buffer announce you and seeing Dana White and all the superstars around the cage. Like it was just like a scary, nerve-wracking environment my first time, but the second time, like I knew what to expect and I had prepared myself and I wasn't going to be denied. Like I told myself no matter what, like I'm going to win this fight. I knew that I was a good fighter. I knew I was a good athlete. It was it was just a lot of the nerves and like I said, like the immaturity of being there. It happens to a lot of fighters. A lot of fighters get into the UFC for that first time and they completely shut down. And that's what happened to me. But the second time I was able to bounce back and I went on a pretty good win streak there for a couple years after that. So again, it was I was grateful for the opportunity to fight Hermes because it's like I just fought a guy that was top five in the world. Pretty much anybody else is going to be like lower than that I'm fighting, especially coming off a loss. So like I'd already fought one of the best, and it just gave me confidence going into every other fight because I'm like, dude, I've already been in there with the best. I know I can beat the best. So like I said, just gave me confidence.
And after this, what was the reason behind going to the WEC? Is there like a UFC contract waiting for you after this performance, or WEC just give you a better contract, better money?
So that's a great question. The UFC acquired the WEC, they acquired Pride, they acquired the WFA. So they had just purchased a bunch of organizations. And Joe Silva, who was the matchmaker at the time, was like, "Hey, we just acquired this organization, the WEC. We're going to make it all around. We're going to build it around lightweights." And they're like, "Hey, we'll guarantee all your fights will be on TV. We'll up your pay, and we want you to go down there and fight." And so it was a lateral move. They gave me more money, but it was owned by the UFC. So it was a better opportunity for me because I was so young at the time, and they wanted to build up this organization, and they wanted to build up the organization with young talent. So that's why they moved me over there, and it was great. Like I got to see all the same people from the UFC. I got to establish like a lot of great relationships, but it allowed me to really grow as a fighter and being in a much smaller organization, fighting in like smaller shows. I think the biggest show I fought in in the WEC was probably around 10, 12,000 people in the arena, maybe 15,000 in an arena. So it wasn't like these big 20, 30,000 person venues. But I was on TV all the time. And that was like the big selling feature. Cause back then we had sponsors and we had sponsors on our shorts and stuff. So if I was on TV, I made a lot more money from my sponsors than had I been on the undercard in the UFC. So it was just financially it was better, but also for me in my growth and my maturation as a fighter, it was better for me to go the WEC. And ultimately the WEC had the best lightweights because you saw what happened when they brought us over in 2011. Immediately the WEC lightweight champions beat the UFC champions, and they continued to hold the belt for a really long time. So the WEC had the better lightweights, in my opinion. Well, I don't even think it's an opinion. I think it's kind of factual because of what I just said. As soon as we came over, we dominated and we ended up winning the world title.
And when you made your WC debut, you were very young because I believe you were 24 years old, but you also were quite experienced as the young fighter because you had 16 bouts, and your first opponent was a guy with 14-3 record. This was Sharon Leggett, and you also make this fight look really easy.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that he was good at was I was just way better at. Like he was known for his wrestling and I wrestled in college and I was a pretty good wrestler. So the one aspect of his game that he was good at, I was better at. So and then like the striking, it wasn't really close. And as far as just being explosive and strong. Like I was just, it was a very, I think, you know, when I was trained for like I was fighting a guy that was #1 in the world. But when I got out there and I grabbed a hold of him, it was, the fight did seem easy.
And do you know, did you know after this fight that you will get a WC title fight after this?
Uh, I did not know for sure because, you know, a lot of things can be said. But when I signed my contract, one of the things that Joe Silva told me is like, you go out there, you win, you'll be fighting for a world title after. So it was in Sharon Liggett. He was just on the Tap Out TV show. So I think he had a little bit of hype and a little bit of momentum behind him. And the way I beat him, they uh, they gave me the title shot. But they did tell me that that was a possibility if I won that fight, that I would get a title shot next, which was, you know, more incentive for me to go to that organization from the UFC. Because after losing to Hermes Franca, I was probably 3-4 wins away, possibly, from getting a title shot. Where in the WEC, I go get one win, then my next fight's a title shot.
And it was a big fight for you because Rob McCullough was a WEC champion. He actually defended the title before, and he was a very good striker. So how big of the challenge it was for you at that point?
Yeah, I mean that was a really scary fight. I had to overcome a lot of demons because I looked up to Rob, and he was a part of the Team Punishment guys with Tito Ortiz, Tiki Gonson. There were a lot of really good fighters that came out of that gym, and I remember watching VHS tapes and DVDs of Rob McCullough's fight. So I was really nervous going into that fight, and it that fight was a really, like, that was a real growing experience. Like, Rob made me a better fighter because that first round with Rob, I tried taking him down and he just kept popping back up. And I was wasting so much energy trying to take him down that, like, I started having flashbacks to the Hermes fight where I gassed myself out because I just kept wrestling him. And when you get to this certain point where, like, you can't go anymore, your body just starts to shut down on you. And I started feeling that in the first round. And there was a time in that corner right after in between the first and second round where my corner man, my coach Trevor Lally, he put his forehead on my forehead and he's like, Jamie, we're gonna have to box him. You're gonna have to trust your striking, and you can box this guy. Just go out there and box him. And I had to, and I went out there and I did that. And in the third round, I ended up knocking him out. But, like, because I couldn't take him down and because I couldn't hold him down, it forced me to trust my striking, and my confidence grew during that fight, but it really grew after that fight. Like, I believed in myself that I was a good fighter, that I could fight anywhere. Because prior to that, I just always depended on my wrestling and my grappling. I did enough striking to just take somebody down and smash them on the ground. But he forced me to grow as a fighter. He forced me to stand in there and trade. And he also, like, it taught me that I could take a punch too. So that was a really great learning experience for me, but it was also pivotal for my growth as an athlete.
And I think that it's like a very good thing to know that when you have a plan E and it didn't work, you have a plan B, and it can work. So it's like you said, you are not one-dimensional fighter, but you have many tools. So if the one thing will not work, you have another. So and in my opinion, it was one of the better performances of your career, especially because Rob McCullough at that point was also one of the top, really top level lightweight in the world.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, Rob was really tough. He hit hard. He had really good striking. He was a world champion kickboxer. He was tough to take down. He trained with a lot of good guys. Yeah, like I just said, like, that fight made me grow, and it really helped my confidence because, again, I knew Rob. I'd known Rob before, like, I had even, like, fought professionally. I knew about this guy. I remember watching videos of him fighting. So it was I was able to beat a guy that I looked up to. and it just made my confidence grow, and then that kind of set me up for my next couple of fights. Like after that, I beat Marcus Hicks and I dominated that. Then I fought Cowboy, who was undefeated. I beat the hell out of Cowboy that first fight. I broke my hand and broke my foot in that fight. Like it it showed me that I belonged, and it reaffirmed the things that people were telling me and the things that I thought about myself. It showed me that I could compete with the best of the best, and it didn't matter whether it was on the ground or if it was on the feet. I belonged there.
And in your next fight in WEC 35, you fought against Marcus Hicks, who won all of his 3 fights in WEC by guillotine choke. So if you can tell me how much of guillotine choke attempts did you do in your training camp?
Oh, I had the best jiu-jitsu guys on my neck all the time. I even had Hobson Mora, who was a 3-time, I think at the time he was like a 3-time Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt world champion, and he had a really good guillotine. And so I had the best guys in the world essentially put me in guillotines. I had big wrestlers like CB Dollaway, Ryan Bader. I had a lot of, and Aaron Simpson. I had a lot of wrestlers that were putting me in guillotine. So I did a lot of guillotine defense. But my goal, like this was the first time in my career where I was like taller than the other guy. So the goal was just to keep the fight on the feet, keep him on the outside. Don't even let him like get close to me. I wasn't going to shoot for a takedown on him. Like shooting for a takedown was not an option on him. I was gonna use my advantages, which was my length, my reach, and my striking skills. And ultimately the game plan worked out. But yeah, like I did a lot of guillotine defense, which is probably why my neck is screwed up today. Like I have some issues with my neck. And I think I attribute a lot of it to that training camp.
And Marcus Hicks was not the first and not the last fighter that lost his first fight against you, because in your next fight it was a Donald Cerrone. It was a very, at that point, very young fighter, but he was also undefeated. It was a fight that lasted all 5 rounds. And what do you think overall about this performances? Because in the end, when the scorecards were like announced, it was some, let's say, controversy in the end.
Well, yeah, I think the ending was controversial because he kneed me in the face on the ground. I think I was like the first, what happened with Peter Yan and what was the fighter why am I drawing a blank on his name?
Aljamain Sterling.
Yeah. So I mean, I essentially that happened to me. I got kneed in the face on the ground by a professional kickboxer in the 5th round. Like Donald knows better. Like he knows better than to do that. And the doctor ended up stopping the fight. I got a lesion in my right eye on my retina, which was something that is like pretty scary because if you get a detached retina like that's a career-ending injury. So they stopped the fight, and luckily they went to the scorecards because I would have hated to have won on a disqualification. But the fact that they went to the judges' scorecards and I won the rounds. And if you watch the fight, I dominated that fight. There wasn't one round that he had won. I outstruck the striker. I obviously I took him down and beat the hell out of him on the ground. It really wasn't a controversial fight. The ending was controversial because I think Donald at the time, although he was older than me, he is older than me. I think he handled it pretty immaturely. And I was also young and immature as well. So I took what he was saying personally, but I mean, I broke my hand in that fight. I broke my hand in the 1st round of that fight on his head. I don't know if you remember the big goose egg he had on his head, but I had a compound fracture on my right metatarsal right here. I also broke my left foot kicking him in the head. So it's like I fought 4 rounds with a broken hand and fought 2 rounds with a broken foot and still won the decision. So it really wasn't that controversial. I beat him. I beat him handedly. And then we ended up fighting again a couple years later, and he ended up winning the decision. So I mean, he kind of got his revenge, but ultimately, you know, that was just another great learning experience for me. Like having to endure the kind of pain I had to endure and to keep getting off that stool round after round and going out there and fighting with limited weapons and beating a guy that was a professional kickboxer that was also undefeated in MMA and had all this hype behind him. That was, you know, that was for me, that was like overcoming another monster. And yeah, it was great.
Yes, but like you said, you won this fight, but one of the judges scored it for Donald Cerrone. What was a quite big surprise for me, because I thought that you won this fight without much of the controversy. I mean, not the illegal knee, but like for the over 20 minute fights. So this is one thing that I'm not really sure what happened.
Well, I think it's whenever you get these judges involved, I've been involved with a couple bad judges' decisions, and I don't want to. I'm not going to sit here and say there's corruption or whatever, but people pick favorites. I think people are uneducated, or just people are just flat out corrupt. I don't know what it is, but that fight wasn't close. It really wasn't. And the fact that one of the judges had him winning the fight, it's like, what round did he win? Like what you want to give him the fifth round where he illegally kneed me in the face on the ground? Like is that the round that you're going to give him? Because the four rounds prior to that were not close. I outstruck him. I took him down. He didn't take me down. I smashed him when I got on the ground. Like at no point in that fight was he ever in control. So yeah, I think, you know, the judges are tough. You're seeing that more and more, and not just in our sport with with MMA. I mean, there's tons of historically bad judges decisions, but even in like other sports like American football, American and basketball, you're seeing referees that are just missing calls or making bad calls. I think people are corruptible, and I think that's ultimately what happened.
And after this fight, you had a 1 year break, and I guess that this is because of your injuries that you have to have some time to like heal your body up.
Yeah, I had to have I had to have this hand operated on twice. You can I don't know if you it's kind of hard to see on this camera, but this hand just looks way different than this hand. And yeah, I had to have two reconstructive surgeries on this hand, and that put me out for a year. I couldn't even train for 6 months. Because first they went in there and I had pins sticking out of my hand. I had to have pins in my hand for about 8 weeks. And so I couldn't even sweat. I couldn't go on a treadmill. I couldn't like do anything. I was literally I just had to sit around for like 8 to 10 weeks and not do anything. I got the pins out. The bone didn't quite heal correctly. So then they had to go back in, reoperate on the hand, straighten out the bone, and then they put a plate on it. And then after the plate was in, I had to take another 6 weeks of no training. But at least when I got the cast off, or when I got the plates put in and they just stitched it up, I was able to go. I could at least start doing conditioning, so I could go for runs. So like, but I mean, I had 6 months where I wasn't able to wrestle, to grapple, to punch, to kick, to do anything. The only thing I could really do was run, and I would lift weights with this hand, and I would lift legs, but I couldn't hold anything with this. So it was definitely a setback. You know, one of the things that I tell fighters now, and that even when I coach wrestlers too, it's like you got to stay active. And that was one thing about earlier in my career, that I was fighting like 2, 3 times a year, but I was also doing jujitsu competitions. I was doing boxing smokers and stuff like that. I was constantly competing. And so when after that injury with Donald, I was out for a year. I wasn't able to compete. My first competition was my next fight against Ben Henderson. And you know, there's something to be said about, you know, the lack of competition, the competition anxiety, and just that staying in the habit of winning. And so that was like the first time in my life that I had taken a break from competition since I was like 5 years old. And yeah, I mean, I suffered the consequences, but ultimately it was another beautiful lesson learned.
And were you a little bit afraid that maybe you were not able to go back to fighting on a really high level?
That was never a concern because I think I was like only 25 at the time. 20, yeah, I think I was like in 2008 is when that happened. I was like 24, 25 at the time, 2008, 2009. So I wasn't worried about that. I knew once I got into my 30s, fighting would be a lot more difficult and competing at a high level. But no, I felt that I'd put a lot of work in over the years and then taking that year off. Like I didn't, I wasn't like a less technical fighter. I didn't have the same, I just didn't have the same winning momentum. I didn't have like the constant competition. So it's like it was just a different situation. But like to answer your question, like no, I wasn't ever worried about that. That wasn't a concern because it was a handbrake. It wasn't like I broke my jaw or broke something like way more serious, tore my knee up or whatever. Like I figured I would come back.
And in WC 36, you fought against Benson Henderson, and we know how good he was, and how good he was for so many years. And he caught you in the third round. He won by guillotine choke. And what did you feel after this fight? Did you feel that you could do something better, or did you like thought that maybe you will get a rematch or maybe a fight for title shot next?
Um, so I kind of had a falling out with the organization when I got injured after I got injured with that Donald fight, and I fought Benson. I thought I should have gotten an immediate rematch. I made a mistake. I mean, I think it was pretty obvious. I won the first 2 rounds. He ran away from me pretty much the whole time, and I shot a takedown on him out of just like frustration. But he had a really good game plan. Ben and I had trained together prior to that. Like I brought him in for the Marcus Hicks fight, and I beat the shit out of Ben. Ben and Efren Escudero, they would round robin on me. So Ben would do a 5 minute round with me in MMA. Then Efren Escudero would do a 5 minute round. They would just round robin on me every 5 minutes for a total of 5 rounds, and they didn't win a round. So I knew I could beat him, but you can't make mistakes with Ben. And Ben is good, and Ben continued to get better and better and better. And that was his night. And after that fight, I wanted a rematch, but the organization wanted to put me back with Donald. But before giving me Donald, they gave me Kamal Chalaroos, and that was the fight that I had in Canada. Which I'm sure we're going to talk about too. But the fight in Canada, I mean, Kamal kicked me in the balls 4 times. They warned him. They warned him. They took a point away, and then he kicked me again in the balls for the fourth time, and then they warned him again. So I think this is kind of where corruption comes in. Like after that, they should have taken 2 points away, but they didn't, or taken another point away. But that fight wasn't close. I beat Kamal. I think he got one takedown on me, but I landed all the significant strikes. He kicked me in the balls multiple times, but the organization wanted me to, they didn't want me to fight for the world title again. They want me to fight Donald because they wanted to prop up Donald. And for some reason, they just didn't like me. So whether they didn't think I was marketable or not, I don't know, but it was me and the organization. We had a real big falling out after that Donald fight, and then with the Benson Henderson fight, I asking for the rematch. They wouldn't give it to me, and they had all the power. They have all the control, so there was nothing I could do.
But it was kind of crazy because you even at that point you were super young. You were a former champion. You had a great fighting style, so it's not like kind of boring clinching or just lay and pray, but almost all of your fights were super exciting. So it was like from my perspective, it's crazy for the organization not to promote you.
I agree. I mean, I think I felt that same way, but you know, I was so young and I was really immature that I took that personally, and that really affected like the rest of my career. You know, when you lack that control and people don't believe in you and you get treated like shit and you get treated differently and things don't make sense. You see what they're doing for all these other guys, but they're not doing these things for you. Like I felt like I was the most underappreciated fighter, and I never said no to a fight. Like I would take fights on short notice. I fought anybody and everybody. And even like in that goes throughout my whole career. You know, they paid me like shit. Like I said, they undervalued me. They never marketed me. Yeah, it was tough. It was a tough pill for me to swallow, but ultimately, again, like I keep going back to this, like there were a lot of beautiful lessons I learned, and it forced me to kind of grow up. And you know, just certain things in life are just completely out of your control, but the things you can control are your attitude and your effort. And unfortunately, I was so young at the time and immature that the way I was being treated by the organization impacted both my attitude and my effort. I lost the love for the fight. I lost I lost a lot of love for fighting. I didn't care if I won or lost anymore. I was just like fighting to get a paycheck. It was tough, man. It was a really, there were a lot of demons I was battling, and I don't like, I think the WEC and the UFC could have done a better job of taking care of me. I think they could have done a better job of recognizing the value that I brought to the organization, how much I cared, how hard I worked, you know, my fighting style, like you just alluded to. I If they would have put some money into me, or if they would have just appreciated me and marketed me, I think I could have been a superstar. But they didn't see it that way, and ultimately, you know, these are the cards I was dealt. And you know, that experience in the WEC and in the UFC has like set me up for what I do now, you know, for work. And I think it's ultimately made me a better person.
In your next fight in WC 39, you fought against Kamal Shalrus. He was undefeated fighter. He also was a freestyle wrestler. So before this fight, you fought against really tough, but also tough guys, but also big names. And he was, I think, that more of unknown fighter, and you still was able not only to fight him, but also to beat him.
Yeah, unfortunately, the judges didn't think so, right? I beat him. I think he knows I beat him. I was a better fighter. And he also like I told you earlier in the interview, like he kicked me in the balls 4 times. Four. Warning, warning. Took a point away. Then a warning? Like that, it made no sense. I like hindsight's always 2020. I should have just, after that fourth kick to the balls, I should have just stopped. I should have just said that I didn't want to continue. And he should have just taken that DQ or whatever. That cost me, because if had I won that fight, they probably would have had no choice but to give me, well, no, they would have had a choice. They still would have made me fight Donald Cerrone no matter what. But I think I would have had a much bigger foot, you know, to stand on to lobby for that fight against Benson. So yeah, it was corruption, man. That's the only thing I could see. That I could say, just corruption from the referees to the judges. It was that was really terrible, man. That was a tough one. And it set me back big time. And because of that, like my heart just got crushed. And like I told you earlier, like I was already having a hard time with the organization, but now I knew that the corruption was real. Now I knew that they had something against me, and I only like I didn't care about fighting. I lost my love for it. I literally, after that, I just fought for a paycheck. I just fought for a paycheck, and that's no. You ask any fighter, if you're fighting for the money, you're fighting for the wrong reasons, and I was fighting for the wrong reasons.
on the paper it was of course the draw, but it's like it's really hard to say that it was a draw or that he won, because it was obvious. I think the obvious fight that you won, but it's actually not the first time and not the last time that your scoring of your fights are kind of crazy. We'll talk a little bit later about like 30-27 to Melvin Gillard, what was probably also like super crazy. But you took this fight. You I think that you looked really good, and then on WEC 51 you fought a rematch against Donald Cerrone. And what do you think overall about this performance? Because at that point Donald Cerrone was also a little bit more experienced than for the first fight when you fought, and I think that he was a better fighter than he was in your first meeting.
For sure. Donald, he made some great adjustments. I mean, he trains with, arguably one of the best MMA coaches in the history of the sport at Greg Jackson's, and I think they completely shifted the game plan. And I was very emotional going into that fight, going into that training camp. I wanted to beat Donald at his own game like I did the first time. I wanted to outstrike the striker. So I did no wrestling. I wanted just to kickbox him, and I wanted to beat the hell out of him. And he shifted the game plan. He won that fight with takedowns. He took me down, and like I said, I didn't train for it. I didn't prepare for it. I was very emotional going into that fight, but he won with the takedowns. I mean, it was a close fight. I definitely landed the bigger shots, the harder shots on the feet, like punching wise. But he won with those takedowns. I think he got 3 takedowns in the fight, and those 3 takedowns were the decision maker. He had a great game plan. He had a really good game plan. I was super emotional. He kept it together, and it was just so funny that he was talking all this shit about knocking me out and being this better striker, but then when push came to shove, he didn't want to strike with me. He had to wrestle to win, and which is fine, because there have been tons of fights where I had to wrestle to win, so I get it. I get it. You do what you need to do to win the fight, and he did that. But I thought he wanted to stand and trade and like fight like men, and he resorted to the wrestling. But it was a good fight. Again, I went into that fight like I didn't care if I won or lost. I was fighting for a paycheck. But even me, like, not fully there, not fully committed, it was still a really close fight, and he was in a lot of trouble a few times.
And I think that it's like it would be good to see. I think let's say in 2011 your third fight, because I think that previous fights were great. So I think that the third one also would be great, and it would decide who is winner of this confrontation, because you won the first one, he did the second one. So the perfect in this like 2011 would be a perfect solution, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, the UFC at that time, because they brought us all over to the UFC, they had made a decision to go a different direction, right? They let me go from the organization, and I had to fight a few times in smaller shows to kind of earn my way back in 2012. But yeah, I mean, I had always thought that I'd get that trilogy. I was kind of hoping I'd get that trilogy fight in the UFC. It just never came to fruition.
Uh, and in your last fight in WEC, it was WEC 51, I believe.
Yeah.
So sorry, 53. You fought against Shane Roller. He was a great wrestler, and he was like he actually got a sneaky good record, because he was 5-2 in WEC. He won against some really good fighters like Anthony Njokuani, like Danny Castillo. So I think that it was a good fight, and you dropped him in the first round. It looked like you can finish him, but unfortunately you even slammed him. But unfortunately for you, he caught you in the rear naked choke.
Yeah, that was like I mean, obviously that was my last fight in the WEC. I didn't really care whether I won or lost. I was feeling so sorry for myself at that point in time. I was like, I was playing the victim of my circumstance. And again, I was just really immature at the time. And I'm like, watch, I just go out there because I was better than him. I was better than him, better striker. Arguably I was a better wrestler, but at least more athletic wrestler, better grappler. And I I hit him, I hurt him, and then it's like I slip and fell. Like I was literally joking in the training camp. Like the only way I lose this fight is if I, slip on a banana peel and he gets me. And like that's literally what happened. I slipped and he was able to take my back and finish me. But like I said, I didn't really care. Like I didn't go into those fights, like the Kamal fight, the Donald fight, the Shane Roller fight. I didn't go to any of those fights with the same type of passion, energy, and love for the sport like I had previously. Like, because it was that passion, that love that pushed me through like those hard times, those difficult moments that you're just inevitably gonna face in a fight. It's that passion, that love, that determination. And I had just lost it all because I didn't feel appreciated. I didn't feel like they cared about me, and I felt like they had done me wrong, and I was just there for a paycheck. So yeah, it was tough. It was a tough time. That was a tough loss because like I was so much better than that guy, and I had him hurt like right away, and I literally slipped, and he was able to finish me. Like it was crazy.
And before your first Donald Cerrone fight, in the promo of this fight, you said that I want to be a legend in WEC. And after these years, do you consider yourself the promotional legend?
I'm not, I don't want to say like, I feel like that's like a tricky question because it'd be really arrogant for me to say that. But I think that I had some really good fights. I think I put in some really good performances, whether I won or I lost. I was always entertaining, always. And like that is undeniable. I had some fights where I came back, where I was losing, I came back and won. I had some fights where I just blew guys out. Um, so to sit here and say I'm a legend, no, but I think that if there was a WEC Hall of Fame, I think I should be in it.
Yes, I definitely agree because you were not only a champion, but you also defend the title 2 times, and you always gave like great fights to defend. So either in the like the sport aspect or even from fans' perspective, I think that there should be no doubt that if it would exist at a WC Hall of Fame, you should be one of the fighters who is up there.
For sure, for sure. And I don't think, I'm saying this from the most humble perspective possible. I think if there was a WEC Hall of Fame, I think I should be in it. But as far as, calling myself a legend, I don't think I had enough wins in the organization. I don't think I had enough dominant performances. I think had I been able to fight Ben again, and I would say like if had I been able to fight Ben again and beat him, then I would consider myself a legend. But the fact that that never happened, the fact that the Kamal Shalarus fight happened and they found a way to steal that win from me, I think that really set me back from legendary status. And then also like the decision loss, the decision loss to Donald, but the loss to Shane Roller really kind of derails from that legendary status to me, in my opinion.
And after your WC journey, you fought 4 times in the regional scene. You went 3-1, and all your wins were like super quick. And you got a let's say call to from the UFC to fight against Edson Barboza. And if you can tell me, what do you when you took this fight, what did you feel at that point?
Yeah, I want to kind of touch on the smaller shows that I fought in. The one loss I had in the smaller show, they changed my opponent the day before. The guy was in a higher weight class. I was supposed to fight at 155. I was at the weigh-ins, weighing 155. They changed my opponent at the weigh-in to 170. He didn't make 170. He weighed like 175 or 176. And I ended up getting food poisoning on the day of the fight, and I was in such a bad financial position that no matter what, I had to take that fight. I had to take the fight, and I needed the money. And it was a really, really terrible situation. The organization, I think it was called Titan FC. They're terrible people, terrible ownership. They are just not good humans. I don't know if this was their game plan the whole time to try to, prop this guy up to try to get him a win, but like I was weighing 155 pounds, and then they told me that I'm going to be fighting a guy at 170, and then the guy didn't even make weight, and then I got sick, and I still had to fight. Like that was a really tough situation. But I think with the 3 fights that you talked about where I finished the guys all pretty quickly, I think you got this. You got to see the type of fighter I truly was. That was just kind of a one-off. I got sick. They changed the opponent. It was in a higher weight class after I'd already cut all the weight. So that was a really unfortunate circumstance, and I think those are really legitimate excuses as far as losing is concerned. I don't like making excuses for anything, but that was a very I think those are like at least legitimate. But yes, going into that Edson Barboza fight, I remember I was talking to my friends because I figured that my goal was to get back to the UFC, and I figured that I'd probably just get a last minute call, kind of like how I got my first shot in the UFC against Hermes. I took that fight on 2 weeks notice. So I figured I had to be ready. If somebody got hurt or whatever, my manager had a really good relationship with Joe Silva and the matchmakers there. So I knew that there was a possibility that I could get the call. But I remember talking to my friends. I'm like, the only person I didn't want to have to fight was Edson Barboza. Like that was like, I don't care who they call me for, as long as it's not that guy. Because I think everybody was scared of that guy. He was kicking people's legs off, and like the fight before I fought him, he fought Terry Edom and kicked his head off. He beat Ross Pearson. He had some really good wins. He was scary. He was undefeated. He was athletic. He was strong. Like he was the next Anderson Silva. So like that was like the one guy me and my friends were joking about, that like I just, they could call me for anybody, just not that guy. And sure enough, I get the call, and it's for that guy. And I watched the Ross Pearson fight, and Ross Pearson did a really good job. Ross Pearson was the first guy that actually brought the fight to Edson. He moved forward and he threw punches, and Ross had some success. Ross was able to get land a lot of shots. He just didn't hit. I don't know if he just didn't hit that hard, or Edson's chin was better than. I don't know, but how I developed my game plan and how me and my team developed our game plan for that fight was based off the Ross Pearson fight. I'm like, I can box just as good, most likely better than Ross Pearson, but Ross never threatened the takedown. So if I could put my boxing and my wrestling together, I have a real opportunity to beat this guy. I could punch him, take him down, control him on the ground. He gets back up, walk him down. Don't let him. I can't let him move forward. I can't let him dictate the pace. I got to circle into his power. So I'm circling away from that spinning wheel kick. But if I can just put pressure on him with my punches and use my punches to set my boxing, use my punches to set my wrestling, and use my wrestling to set my boxing, I have a real opportunity. I have a real shot at beating this guy. And sure enough, man, the game plan worked. My punches, my wrestling set up my punches, and I was able to knock him out. And I think because I knocked him out, I was able to kind of like put together the blueprint on how to beat him. And then, there wasn't a couple fights later. I think Cowboy ended up knocking him out. But, I was the guy that was able to show the world that he was human and beatable. And that was a real defining point in my life, because I remember I was talking to my mom before the fight. After weigh-ins, I'd always get my family together, and we'd always have dinner and stuff together. And I would just tell them, like, Mom, I love you. No matter what happens, just know I want to be here. Like, I want to do this. I want to be here. The outcome could be bad. I could get hurt. I could get knocked out. But just know this is the decision that I'm making. I want to be here. I want to do this. And I think there was like 3 people in the whole world that believed that I could win, and I'm gonna go ahead and say that I don't know if I was one of them. You know, I was definitely scared, but I knew that I had the tools and I had the guts and the heart to stick it out and to endure the pain. The only thing I was scared of is the things I can't control, like getting knocked out. I can't control how I take a shot and whether I stay conscious or not. But I know that I promised myself that no matter what happened, I would fight to the bitter end. And yeah, man, you know, everything happened. And my life was kind of changed at that moment because it really it showed me that I can overcome demons and I can bounce back. And it doesn't matter how low you get, you know, because just a month prior I was fighting in a local regional show, and then now I'm back on the pay-per-view and I just beat the next Anderson Silva. So you know, like I stopped putting limitations on myself after that. It really it was like the Rob McCullough fight and then that fight were probably the 2 most um, career changing and life changing experiences for me. And those fights really helped me overcome a lot of demons, and they both helped me grow as a man, and as a fighter.
And I think that overall people like this kind of story, this kind of like Rocky moments, because he was undefeated, he destroyed everyone, he was a vicious striker, and you were a former WEC champion. You went out of the organization, then it's you're like coming back to UFC, and like you said, not many people believed in you, but you finished him in the first round. So I think that it was some kind of like feel good moment for people, because it's just a like cool story when the guy who's let's say an underdog, he's able to beat the guy who seems to be unstoppable.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that was it definitely was that underdog. You know, I had a mountain of a man in front of me and nobody had figured it out. And it was an opportunity to really like to shock the world, and that's exactly what I did. I shocked the world.
And in your next fight in the UFC, you fought against Joe Lawson, and for me, it is like the best fight ever that people not really talk about, because for me, it is like top 10 fight ever. It is like great action all the time. It's kind of crazy exchanges, but I think that not many people like remember this fight.
Yeah, I mean, it was on Fox, right? So it wasn't a big pay-per-view. That was another fight I took on 2 weeks' notice. I had to lose a lot of weight in 2 weeks. But I mean, I think, you know, you watched the fight. I'm better than him. I was better than him. I got tired. You know, that's what happened. I got tired in the third round. I broke my hand again, broke my hand on his head, in the second round, I think. Yeah, I broke my hand on him in the second round. And I told my coaches in between the second and third round, like my hand's broke. They're like, okay, well, we just got to wrestle him. And I was tired. I was exhausted. You know, I mean, hindsight's always 2020. I should have just kept boxing him. I could have just used my jab, used my kicks, but I listened to my corner and I took him down, and he was a crafty vet. He was able to catch me in a triangle, but I'm better than Joe Lozon. I was better than Joe Lozon. I was dominating that fight, and it was you know, it's so funny. I lost to a lot of guys that I'm better than, which I think is kind of a testament to me, but it's also so damn unfortunate, right? You know, like the best fighter doesn't always win. And sometimes it takes guts to win fights. And Joe Lozon had a lot of guts. He took a lot of punishment. He took a lot of hard shots. And yeah, that was like an easier fight. And I wanted that fight back so bad. I was begging Joe Silva, like, give me that fight again. Just let me have a training camp, because I was so much better than him. Like, he didn't hit hard. He wasn't that strong. So yeah, it was a crazy experience, but ultimately another opportunity for growth.
And after this fight, actually, I like loved your story in 2012, because it was like biggest upset of the year and also the best fight of the year. Yes, best fight of the year. So I think it was crazy. But you ended this year, 2012, against Melvin Gillard. You won by split decision, and it's like it's kind of like funny and surprising that one judge scored this fight 30-27 for Melvin. It's like I'm not sure who know the answer of this.
Yeah, you should, I don't know, man. They got to figure out something with the judges. The judges need to train. I think the judges need to have competed in the sport in order to become judges. They need to figure out some sort of way to make the judging like this better. I don't know how you can have somebody that's never been in a fist fight before, never competed, never trained, but yet they have the power to decide who wins or who loses in a fight. Like it just doesn't make any sense. But luckily that didn't cost me a loss. Thank God it didn't cost me a loss. But um, yeah, that fight that was silly. That was so dumb. I was so much better than him. And like at no point in that fight was it even remotely close. I didn't get hit with anything. I mean, I was able to go home. That I drove back to Phoenix, like so from Las Vegas, I drove back to Phoenix, which is like a 5 hour drive. I drove home that night. I was back to training the next day, like it was or next sorry on that following Monday. So I took Sunday off. I was back in the gym on Monday. Like nothing happened. And no point in that fight did I get hurt. So yeah, it was that was crazy. But I'm luckily what happened with Kamal Shalarus, like luckily that didn't happen again.
But in the end, it was a big win for you because Melvin Gillard still was one of the best strikers in the division, and he also was super dangerous. So I think that it is still one of the top three, top four of your wins of your career.
Yeah, and he also like a lot of these guys that I fought were making two, three, and four times more money than me. So when I fought Edson Barboza, even though he lost, he still made twice as much as me. When I fought Joe Lozon and I lost, he made four times more than me. When I fought Melvin Gillard and I won, he still made like three times more than me. So I fought all these guys that were in these pay scales way higher than me. And so I thought like because I beat these guys, because after that Melvin Gillard fight, I went to contract negotiations and that like we're probably going to get into it, but that was like the downfall of my career. They wouldn't pay me as much as they were paying those other guys. Like not even close. I was still being paid half what Melvin Gillard was making, and I beat him. I was still getting paid more than half, or like yeah, half, yeah, less than half than what Joe Lozon was getting paid. So it was a really uh yeah, tough. It was tough. Tough organization to work for sure.
And in your next fights, I think that it's much of the bad luck because it was a split decision, a loss to Gleison Tibau. Then you were winning against Abel Trujillo, but he caught you. It was an ankle injury against James Krause. So I think that some unfortunate things happened to your career in this few next UFC bouts.
Yeah. I mean, like you just said it. Like it was the Abel Trujillo fight. I took that fight on 2 weeks' notice. So that was like another like just crazy circumstance. And I I gotten injured. I had gotten injured right before that fight, but I had like I made a commitment. I told the organization I would take it, I would do it. And that ultimately like my injury definitely held me back. But that was a fight that I was clearly winning. And yeah, that sucked. The Gleason T-Bow fight, I thought that was just a terrible decision. I landed way more strikes than he did. I think he took me down twice. I took him down once, and like he didn't do anything with his takedowns. When I took him down, I smashed him. I beat him on the feet. I never got really good breaks. Like I never got a lucky break when it came to a decision. If a fight went to a decision, I just assumed I was going to lose. And it's kind of shitty, but that's kind of how my career ended up turning out. And then yeah, the James Krause fight, I was better than James Krause. He just kind of got lucky. He did one of those low calf kicks and ended up breaking my ankle. So, I mean, which happens in a fight, but I still won that round. I mean, I won the round. I still landed the more significant strikes. I took him down. I beat him up on the ground. Like that was like another fight where like even on one leg, I was better than that guy. And then like then the last fight with Drew Dober, like that was just like a really unfortunate circumstance. I went to throw Drew Dober in a wrestling move, a wrestling throw, and I hit my head on the mat and knocked myself out and just woke up in a rear naked choke. It was so crazy. Like I didn't even remember like what happened. I just like how like I remember throwing, like trying to throw or thinking that I'm gonna throw this guy. Then next thing I know, he's on my back choking me, and that was yeah, that was wild. It was a crazy fight, but like after that, like I had realized like I was done. Like I couldn't catch a break. You know, anything bad that could happen did happen. You know, doing a basic wrestling move, I knocked myself out. You know, fighting a guy that I was better than in James Krause, like I broke my ankle. And then even like beating like Abel Trujillo, I was so much better than him. And then to get knocked out, like I just, you know, I kind of started feeling sorry for myself again. And I was worried about the concussions. I had gotten a concussion about 6 days before my last fight with Drew Dober. So I think that's like ultimately what made my head so sensitive. Like when I hit the mat, and then obviously the day before, I had cut a bunch of weight, right? Like I had to weigh in at 155. So I think a combination of the crazy weight cut, getting knocked out 4 days or 6 days before that fight, and then you know having that fight like that, I think all those things kind of created the perfect storm. And I had to call it. I was just done. I couldn't stay healthy. You know, the sport, it's a young man's sport, and I feel like God was telling me like, dude, it's just time to move on. So I took God's advice and moved on.
And it is kind of crazy that you finished your career 9 years ago and you are still only 39. So it means that you like finished it when you were 30.
Yeah, man, it's so crazy because I when I hang out with my girlfriend and we watch some fights, it's like we see Donald fight or we see some of these guys fighting. I'm like, damn, damn, like or Edson still fighting. I'm like, God, I don't know how these guys are still doing it, you know. And I hope that they're like not doing it because they have to. I hope they're doing it because they want to. But I always knew that there was going to be a life for me after fighting because I just never made that much money fighting. So I knew that I was going to have a career after. And when I got those two concussions in a row, when I got, you know, when I got knocked out in training and then I got knocked out, then I knocked myself out in the Drew Dober fight, like I was really messed up for about 6 months. Like I'd be driving my car and I'd forget where I was going. Like I couldn't remember, like my short-term memory was so bad. I was like forgetting people's names, and yeah, there's a lot of anxiety, and I was dealing with some depression issues because these are all symptoms of multiple concussions, and it was just a really, really hard time for me. And I knew that I needed to get away and stop. And I knew that I was never going to come back. You know, some people retire, and when I retired, I thought, you know, maybe there'd be a chance that I could come back later on. But when I suffered those consequences for the 6 months after that last fight with the concussion, I'm like, I'm never doing it again. And it's so crazy to see these guys fighting now and how just violent and how like vicious it is. I'm like I look at it, I'm like I can't believe I even used to do that. Like I'm just such a different person now than I was back then.
And after ending your career, are you right now an MMA coach, a wrestling coach? Are you in some way connected to the world of MMA?
That's a great question. And so I when after I retired, I owned a gym for a couple of years. I owned an MMA gym, and I built up that business, and I ended up selling the business and I made some money on it. And I took that money that I made off the business and I went back to college to finish my degree. And after that, I went into medical sales. I started doing medical sales, and that's what I do now currently, do medical sales, and I live in Tampa, Florida. And I coached high school wrestling. I was an assistant coach for a couple of years, and then I became the head coach for 4 years, just coaching high school wrestlers. I just didn't. I wanted to get away from MMA, and I wanted to work with kids. And when I moved out here to Tampa, which I did last year, it's been about a year. I've been out here. I got involved with an MMA gym out here called South Tampa BJJ and MMA, and I'm one of the coaches. I help coach the amateur MMA fighters, and I help some of the guys train for fights. So um, I am involved in the sport now. I do help coach. I don't think I'm going to coach any pros, and it's not going to be something that I do full time. I like working with the amateurs, the young guys that are passionate about it, that just want to do it for the fun and for the love. And so yeah, so to answer that was a really long-winded answer to yes, I'm coaching, I'm involved, but I've only been coaching MMA for about 8 months now.
So maybe in a few years we can see you in the corner, like cornering a world champion or like top contender in the one of the top promotions.
I mean, maybe like I said, like I really like working with the amateurs. When money and the business side gets involved, it takes away from the purity of the sport. So if somebody asked me to corner them in the UFC fight, I would do it. I would do it, but that's not what I really want to do. I want to coach these amateur guys. I want to help get them to where they want to go, and then just like set them free. I don't want to have to like worry about these guys paying me or any of that stuff, because like I said, whenever you get money involved, it complicates things. So I'm gonna stay away from that, I think.
And if the like some grappling organization contact you, but of course for the grappling competition, would you be interested in taking this against some also like former, let's say, very good lightweight champion?
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely be interested in something like that. I recently competed. I hadn't competed in jiu-jitsu or grappling in 7 years, and I just competed last weekend. I beat a couple black belts. Um, I ended up getting pretty tired, and I lost my third match. But I yeah, I grappling is something that interests me. I'm turning 40 next year. So like I'd like to go against some guys like maybe my age, but the competition I just competed in, I competed in the adult like absolute advanced 185-pound division black belts, and my first two matches were against black belts, and I beat the shit out of them. Um, Unfortunately, I don't train as much as I used to. I think I worked out like 5 times in the past month. I think I trained like 5 times in the past month. Prior to that competition. So I think with like, appropriate training and stuff, I think I could really compete well. But I think I would like to do it probably against guys around my age. I don't want to compete against the youngsters anymore. It's just different, man. They wake up the next morning and they're able to it's like nothing even happened. Like for me, I was sore as hell all week last week after just 3 grappling matches.
Okay, Jamie. So many thanks for the conversation. I think that it's like very cool to hear your story, because you are, I think, the forgotten man of MMA, because you were really successful many years ago, and you retired quite early. And it would be interesting to see, to be honest, what happened to you when you would be fighting in like 2015, 16, because I think that you were in this time that you still can be super successful, but unfortunately we couldn't like watch it.
Yeah, I mean it may be unfortunate for fans, because like I probably still had some good fights left in me, but ultimately for me, like I was just ready to move on, man. I love this sport so much, and it didn't love me back the same way, but it was such a great opportunity. My career in the UFC really set me up for a lot of things. Like, the job that I have now, I don't think I would have gotten without having the past I had and having the fight background that I did. So, and I think the lessons that I learned in the organization and throughout that journey have really set me up for success, and they've ultimately made me the person I am today, which I kind of enjoy the person I am today. So I'm grateful for it. It was an amazing opportunity, and it's opened a lot of doors for me. So, you know, I don't have any regrets about how it ended, nor do I have any regrets about not continuing to fight.
So in the end, it is a good thing that you ended when you won it.
Yes, sir. I got to go out on my terms. You know, I'm not like Tony Ferguson, who's, lost 7 in a row, and everybody's telling him to retire. I got to retire on my own terms.
Okay, so once again, thanks for your time.
All right. Have a great day, and thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.